Hello everyone. Hope you're having a good week this week. It's Friday. That means it's time for our weekly studio review. This week's studio is one of the most popular assignments that we've got. It's about making flags and yeah. I mean, what else is there to say? It was such an awesome experience watching you all be creative and make some fun flags in class the other day, yesterday and the day before. There were some other parts of the studio, though, that I think are worth talking about as well. And so I'm going to start with the first part here. This is actually probably the part that is most relevant to the upcoming homework assignment. So I might talk about that a little bit more once we're done going through the studio. But we want to read in data about shapes from a file. And so we're going to start by taking a look at the provided files. So you can see that we've got some files here that describe shapes. And so if I open one of them, the first thing that we see pop up is the name of the shape. The following three values are intended to represent the color. So the red, green, and blue values that are used to make the color. There's going to be a true or false value following that indicates whether this should be filled in or not. And then the remaining information is in the case of a rectangle, it'll be where the center point is and how big the rectangle should be. But you can see we've got other shapes. So if I open one of these other files, you can see that for this one it says ellipse, the different color, similar dimensions. If I open one of these triangles, however, the way we draw triangles is different. So you can see there's a lot more information down here because we have to use a different method to draw the triangles. So we want to write code that can accommodate all of these shapes. And potentially many more, right? So let's get started. I'm going to open Interpret Drawing file. Here is the code that you've seen from class that indicates how you can choose a file to open with the scanner instead of using keyboard input. And the first thing that we need to do is start retrieving data out of this file, but the order that we do that is very important. So the first thing that we see here is text. It's a word, rectangle. So if we wish to acquire that in our code, then we need to figure out which method we're going to use from the scanner class. And it's probably going to be one of these next methods. One thing that I saw a fair amount is people try to use in.nextLine, and this is a very, very good guess. I can understand why you would be drawn to trying this method. However, if we print out the contents after we acquire that value, you can see that we get the entire thing, the entire file. And that's not really what I was going for. I was just going for this first part right here that says rectangle, the name of the shape. So let's take a look at the API and see if we can't find something else to use. Notice that I'm using Eclipse to help me with the API here. There's one that's just called next, and it says it finds and returns the next complete token, where a token is just a chunk. You can think of tokens being separated by spaces. We don't call them words because we don't know if it's going to be a word or not. It could be a number, but it's going to grab the next available token for us, which hopefully will be that first word. And if we run the program again, we can see that, okay, yes, we just get that first word this time. That's good. That's what we want. The next values in the file are going to be the red, green, and blue values in that order. Again, the order is important. So we are making sure to pay attention to the order that these show up in the file and reading them in the exact order that they appear. Oops, misspelled that word there. Also notice that because I expect the red, green, and blue values to be integers, I'm using the appropriate API call here of in.nextInt. All right. The next value that we see is either true or false to indicate whether it is going to be a filled shape or not. So let's go ahead and read that in. Next Boolean would be the appropriate one there since it's going to be either a true or false value. And at this point, we kind of have a fork in the road, right? If I'm doing a rectangle, I'm going to have 4 values. If I'm doing an ellipse, I'm going to have 4 values. But if I'm doing a triangle, I'm going to have more than that. I'm going to have 6. So what we do depends on the shape that we have. So what I'm going to do is, for now, ignore the triangle part and just focus on rectangles and ellipses, since the format of those is pretty similar. And so for rectangles and ellipses, I have 4 values, and the order is important. If you don't remember the order, then pull up the standard draw API. You can just type it right into Google. It should be the first thing that pops up. And so here's the rectangle. You can see that X is first, then Y, then half width, and half height. And for the ellipse, it's a similar story. X first, then Y, and then we call them different names, right? But they still kind of represent the same sort of thing. Semi-major axis, semi-minor axis are the half width and half height of an ellipse. So let's go ahead and create some variables for X, some variables for Y, and then I'm just going to call them half width and half height, even though they could be for an ellipse. And at this point in time, we can actually start trying to, piece these things together. I should have successfully read in all of the information from one of the files, so we should be able to successfully start piecing things together. If I just assume for a moment that this shape is a rectangle, then let's take care. We know that that's not always going to be true, and I'll come back and deal with that later, but let's start with the colors, right? How do I deal with the colors? That tells us what color we wish to draw the shape on. So if we look at the API, there has to be a way to change the color, and in fact there is. There's 2 different ways to do it, and both of them will work. You can see there's one that just accepts the red, green, and blue values directly, so that's pretty convenient to use. So we can do that by saying standard draw.set pen color, and then just pass in the red, green, and blue values. Whether it's filled or not depends on this boolean here. I might skip that one for just a second too. Jump down here and draw a rectangle. We already kind of looked this one up in the API, so we see that it's plugging in those values. Let's just see if it does that part. I know that we're not done yet. We still have some more work to do, but let's just do that part and see what happens. If I ask it to draw a rectangle. So that one looks correct. That is a black outlined rectangle. However, if I run the filled one, so I get the pink color, that's good, but it's not filled. So we need a way to figure out whether this should be filled or not. We're going to need an if statement for that. All right. Oh, whoops. That's the unfilled version. The filled version will have, filled rectangle like that. Okay, so let's give this another try here. Test out our rectangles. The black one still looks good. This pink one should hopefully be filled now, and it is. That's good. It's technically a square, but squares count as rectangles. If that bothers you and you want to, test something out, you're welcome to modify these files a little bit, make one of them a genuine rectangle by switching the half width or the half height, and then you should be able to see that, okay, yes, it is in fact reading the data from the file, right? Or if I switch this to true, I should now have a filled rectangle if I select this file, right? Cool. But we still haven't covered ellipses. And we still haven't covered, we still haven't covered triangles. So in order to do that, we need to visit this shape value here. So we need to ask what shape we're drawing before we draw it. Now, it might be tempting to do something like this. In fact, I could completely understand why you would do something like this. Or not square, it should be rectangle, sorry. However, there is going to be an issue with this for reasons that we'll discuss in more detail later on, unfortunately using double equals is not the proper way to compare strings. We use double equals to compare lots of things. They're great for comparing ints, doubles, booleans, all that fun stuff. But strings just work a little bit differently. And so in order to compare strings, we're going to use something called dot equals. So if the value of this variable is equal to rectangle, then I'll do this stuff. Otherwise, we can tell it to draw an ellipse instead, correct? I can just come down here and switch these to say ellipse. And that should take care of the second shape. If it's a rectangle, do the rectangle stuff. Otherwise, do the ellipse stuff. Okay. Let's choose one of these ellipse ones and see. Okay, so it's a circle, not an ellipse, but circles technically are ellipses, just like squares are technically rectangles. Here's an outlined one. And again, if you want a true proper ellipse, you're welcome to tweak these. Oh yeah, that's a good ellipse right there. Let's make sure the rectangles still work too. Yep, they sure do. Okay, but we're still not quite there yet. We've taken care of rectangles and ellipses, but what we don't have are triangles. And triangles, remember, require a little bit more thought because they are going to have more values down here than what the rectangles and ellipses had. So if we think about where we're at in our code, right, these values for the triangle are not, they just don't exist. There is no x, y, half width, half height. What the triangles are providing instead are a list of points for the vectors. And so you can see that we're going to need to, there is no triangle method. I actually talked about this in class. If we wish to draw triangles, we have to use the polygon or filled polygon method. And so what the values in the file represent for a triangle are the x and y coordinates of the vertices. And I believe it's given as xy pairs, but let me double check the studio write-up to see. Triangles are represented as x, y, x, y, x, y. So it's x, y, x, y, x, y. Yep. So if we want to accommodate triangles, we need to read in those 6 values and then store them into an array and use the polygon method, just like we saw in class the other day. But we don't need to do this stuff. So what that means for us is that we have to actually check to see if we are doing a triangle first before we read in these values. Because if I'm working with a triangle, then I don't want to read in these values. I want to read in 6 different values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the shape to see if it's equal to triangle first. And if it is, I'll do the triangle stuff. And if it's not, then I can do the remaining stuff that I have down here below that I already am pretty confident is going to handle my rectangle and my ellipse just fine. If it's a triangle, though, we need to read in 6 values. So, and they came in xy pairs. So x1, y1, x2, y2, x3, y3. y1, x2, y2, x3, y3. Once we have these values, we now need to put them into arrays. The API for the polygon method tells us that it's accepting arrays for the x values and an array for the y values. So we need to do something like this. Using the variables that we read in, we can do that. That's not a difficult thing for us to do. We know how to make arrays. So I'm going to make a double array for my x values, which is equal to x1, x2, and x3. I'll make a double array for my y values, which is equal to y1, y2, and y3. And we're ready. We just have to check and see if we're drawing a filled polygon or not, just like we did before. So if we're drawing a filled polygon, make sure to use the filled polygon method. Otherwise, we'll make sure to use the regular polygon method. And hopefully that should do it. Let's take a look and see if we can get some triangles up on the screen now. Oh, great, there's my blue triangle. That looks good. There's a big green triangle that also looks good, but I also want to check and make sure that the old stuff works too, that I didn't break anything, right? So there's my red circle. There's my pink rectangle. Everything appears to be working. So the important concepts to remember here are that the types and the orders that things show up in the file are very, very important. And as I mentioned earlier, you're going to see this pop up again on homework assignment 4. The next part of the studio was making the flag, and so while I think that was such a fun and creative exercise, you're not going to see me do that here. Every flag is different, and I loved looking at all of them. I have made flags before in the past, but I think you all did such a great job making flags. There's not really much else for me to say about it, other than I just really appreciate your enthusiasm and creativity for the assignment. It's always fun to see what people come up with. I'm going to wrap up this studio review by skipping down here to the bottom one, called Norway, the Mother of All Flags. And the idea here is that within the flag of Norway, there are many other countries' flags hidden. We just need to kind of zoom in to different spots of the Norway flag in order to see them. So you've been given some helpful information here as to how big these blocks are. And if you go ahead and run the Norway Mother of All Flags, it'll show you the original Norway flag, right? So I'm continuing on to the other flags, and you can see that they just look the same. So what we need to do is figure out how to change the scale of the picture to show us the flag for France. And so let's walk through this. The idea here is that France has blue, white, and red. Do you see that somewhere in this picture? I can see it kind of right here. So what scale do I need to use? Or I can actually see it in multiple places. I might choose this one. It might be a little easier to do it down here. Well, what scale do you need to use? So this is 6, 7, 8. So we need to start from 8, I believe, or 9. Well, might take a little bit of tweaking. And, how high up do we need to go? We can play around with that as well, I suppose. But for what we're going to do is we're just going to change the x-axis, or the scale, I'm sorry, to go from 8 to 11. And that could be wrong. We'll see in a second. It might take some tweaking. And we'll set the Y scale to go from 0 to 3. I think that'll be okay. Let's see what we've got. All right. There's the original. Uh-oh. That did not work. Did I skip a step? Oh, I did skip a step. We need to include this guy at the bottom to make it work. Sorry about that. Let me restart this now that I've fixed it. All right, hey. Good guess, it worked. First try. But let me explain what actually happened here, right? By calling set x scale 8 to 11, I told it that I wanted to, zoom in on this part of the picture, starting from the x value of 8 going up to 11. And the same thing for the y scale, going from 0 to 3, right? So it just zoomed in on that little tiny chunk, and then it looks like the flag of France. So let's try this again. Indonesia, top half is red, bottom half is white. Looks like there's several areas where that could happen, including right here. So for the x scale, I think that's pretty straightforward. In fact, let me just go ahead and copy this, and I'll change the numbers. I think we could do, from 0 to 3 or something. For the y scale, we need to think a little bit more about that. So the y scale needs to be going from, looks like 6, or no, we need to go up 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 to 11 maybe. Let's try it and see. Run the program again. There's our flag of France. There's our flag of Indonesia. It looks like it works. Okay. The Netherlands has 3 stripes, red, white, and blue, in that order. So if I look at my flag, the red's on top. Looks like we're going to be kind of in the same ballpark actually as before. In fact, it looks like we could use a similar answer to the last one, just make it go a little bit lower on the y-axis. Let's give that a try. Maybe start from 8 instead of 9 here. France, Indonesia, there's the Netherlands. Just a few more left for us to take a peek at. Poland is red on the bottom, white on the top. So that's going to be a similar story, I think, if we start around 6. On the y-axis, 6 to 9 maybe? Let's try it. Eventually I'm going to screw up and make a mistake. Oh, yeah, like right there. That is not what the flag of Poland is supposed to look like. What did I do? Red on the bottom. I'm too high. I need to start before 6. I need to start at 5. 5 to 7 maybe? Let's try that. Ah, there we go. There's the Polish flag. Next up we've got Thailand. So this one looks a little bit tricky, but we've got red, white, and blue with a big blue stripe going through the middle. That's going to be this section right here, right? Or maybe this section right here. So I'm going to try and zoom in on this. I think, how big is that section in the, it's just a little bit of red and a lot of blue. So I'm going to start it at 5 again. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 5 to 10, I think. On the, on the y-axis. I think the x-axis is fine at 0 to 3, although we'll find out in just a moment, see what it looks like. Oops, I was off a little bit. Need to go up to 11. You can see I'm missing that top red stripe. Looked okay otherwise. There it is. Cool. That worked. And then last, but certainly not least, we've got the flag of Finland, which is a white flag with a blue cross on it. So we're really trying to zoom in on this section right here, aren't we? Something like this. So from, on the y-axis would be from 6, 8, 9, 10, from 6 to 10. And then on the x-axis, it's going to be from 6 to, I'm not sure what exactly. We'll have to maybe play around with that a little bit. But on the y-axis, we'll go from 6 to 10. On the x-axis, let me take a look at that picture again. It's going to be at least 6, probably 6 to 7, 8, 9, 10. I'd say maybe 12, because it is longer than it is tall, right? Let's try that and see what it looks like. Close. You can see it's kind of big, fat, blocky Finnish flag. I'm trying to think of what we could do to make it look less like that. Maybe... It is a little bit longer, right? But I don't think I can really go any taller. So maybe I can start this at 5. I don't think it's possible for me to go taller without getting some red in there, but let's see if I can go a little bit longer. Oh, see, but then by doing that, oh, I changed the wrong value. I changed the Y scale, not the X scale. But that did verify that I can't really change the Y scale that much without interfering, without bringing some red in, which we don't want. A little better, perhaps. I think that might be about the best we're going to get here. I know it doesn't look exactly like what's depicted on the picture that's presented, but I think it's about as close as we can get, considering it's tricky. It's definitely a tricky problem. But yeah. All right, let me wrap up real quick by talking about this week's homework assignment. For this week's homework assignment, you're going to be reading in information from a file. So that first part of the studio is really going to come in handy. The order of the data in the files is given in a certain order. So it tells you how many things are in the file, and then tells you some information about the data. We're going to be doing a zombie simulation for a few assignments in this class, and so we're just kind of getting you set up for the first part to see you're eventually going to be drawing pictures like this, where I see one, human surrounded by the red zombies. So you're going to have to read all of this information out of the file and then draw it on the screen using the scanner and the standard draw classes. But pay special attention to the order that the values are given. You're going to need to read them in the exact same order when you attempt this assignment. Okay, that's going to do it for this week's studio review. I will see you all in class next week.